When the Soviet Union was still around, the difference between democracy and dictatorship was relatively clear. Democracies held elections to determine who holds power. Dictatorships didn't. That distinction is no longer the case. Today, more than 80% of all countries hold multi-party elections, but the opposition party does not have an equal chance of winning in all of those countries. Competitive authoritarian regimes, systems that hold multi-party elections but tilt the playing field so that one party or person always wins, are now the most common form of dictatorship in the world. This video discusses how they stay in power. Competitive authoritarian regimes are called many things: hybrid regimes, mixed regimes, electoral authoritarian, but their defining characteristics is that they hold elections, but that those elections are not free and fair. Some countries do obviously rigged elections. These are cases where ballot boxes have been stuffed with fake ballots, citizens are paid or threatened to vote in certain ways, or authorities simply report made-up numbers. For example, in Belarus's 2020 presidential election, poll workers described being pressured to sign off on paperwork that left the vote count blank, or to count votes for other candidates as votes for the incumbent president. This kind of fraud is very easy to detect. International and domestic election monitors and polling stations can often see it happening, and statistics can detect anomalies in the numerical patterns that normal vote counts follow. So modern election rigging has become much more sophisticated. Many authoritarian states shape the conditions under which elections take place in the months and years prior to a campaign, rather than stuff ballot boxes on election day. This is what Steven Levitsky and Lucan Way call creating an uneven playing field. Countries will use state-owned media to vilify their political opponents. They make selective arrests of opposition leaders or party members to intimidate and incapacitate strong oppositions. They will pack the judicial system with friendly judges who will turn a blind eye to corrupt practices. And they use the resources of the government, from the control over public services to networks of allies and state-owned industries, to pressure voters to support the incumbent. This is called administrative pressure. For example, in Mexico before the year 2000, the ruling party, the PRI, maintained power by using its control of radio and the dominant television network to give themselves sympathetic coverage and blacklist opponents. They used their control over business licenses to generate support from economic elites, and used their control over public benefits to direct aid to areas of the country with higher vote totals for their party. The key factor is the use of state institutions to influence election outcomes without direct rigging. It allows some dictators to gain some degree of legitimacy by holding elections, while co-opting some of their potential opponents by having them participate in an unfair game. This points to the fundamental calculation that authoritarian leaders need to make in maintaining power. What combination of carrots and sticks, co-optation and repression, do they need to use to manage their elites and their publics? Elites, like oligarchs, are potential rivals to a dictator. He needs their support in order to maintain control. They are most often managed through patronage, giving them benefits, like exclusive contracts or plum positions in the administration, in exchange for their support for the political system. But, of course, repression is also used. Dissident leaders and defectors from the regime are often arrested or killed, as we have seen in Russia. And while dictatorships do not base their rule on support from the public, no government can survive with absolutely no popular support. Dictators can shape public opinion through clientelism, again giving benefits to supporters, and incorporation. This is creating a political party or other institutions to generate public demonstrations of support for the regime. They also shape public opinion through their control over media outlets. Repression, again, is also present, usually in terms of violent crackdowns on protests. Finally, just a quick note, since all dictators rely on repression to some extent to maintain their power, they need to manage their relationship with the security services, making sure the military and police are well supplied, but not so powerful that they can overthrow the leader themselves. In Eurasia, one common way dictators have organized their political systems is what Henry Hale calls patronal politics. This is a system where politics and economics are centered around the personalized exchange of concrete rewards and punishments. In other words, around patron-client relationships. Politics in these countries does have elements of competition, but this competition is between networks. Instead of political parties competing for votes based on their platforms, Different groups of patrons and their clients compete for influence from the leader, votes from citizens, and just basic economic power. We'll talk more about these influence networks next week, but for now, just note that this is the primary form that competitive authoritarianism takes in the former Soviet world.